Okay. All right, so I want to kick this off with, I think the point was made earlier on, and it's been reiterated a couple of times, how important the data structure and the data standard is to actually achieving liftoff on a project like this. It's really, in some ways, more important, and quite frankly, one of to me, the greatest values that comes out of this is having a data standard for the industry. And so some of you guys are probably familiar with that concept, and have used other types of standards that are in development. But this is really around the warehousing standard, right? Which we don't have one in our industry, or at least one that's uniformly used. So when we're talking about this, the value that comes is when we can actually compare apples to apples across all levels of insurance, right? And so creating that has been, part of that first level design. Now, AAIS will do that based upon the IIW model, which Joe will talk about, and we'll do that for data reporting, for this world of data reporting. And we'll probably keep, and that's going to transition more into one of those working groups that Joan was talking about, which I'll chair to begin with. But then as this takes on different properties of the different things you are interested in adding, that birds of a feather kind of mentality, where you've got different groups that goes, well, I really would like to see the financial data go on one. Well, that's a working group, right? And so the goal is that as we progress, right, we'll be starting to gain more insight and create data standards around other things that we want to put in. We're happy to do it because we have the IIW to publish that data standard, that basic data standard. But there's going to be an evolution of that, right? And that's going to be an evolution that's probably going to be beyond data reporting and regulatory reporting. So all of those things will happen in the community, right? We're sponsoring this. We see how important getting started in this is. That was a result of a couple of design thinkings. Both the regulators and the company said, we got to have a data standard. And we all have to, be able to get this data into formats that we can actually make it, accessible and talk to each in the same terms. So with that, Joe has led our project around most of the architecture work and the data standard development, and is actually knee-deep right now in the auto development. But we're going to talk about the homeowner standard and how he's approached and how we've kind of gone through and developed some of that. So let's start with, take it away. I'll let you start, and then I'll ask you questions.
Welcome to nap time right after lunch, talking about data standards. As Robin was alluding to, we've kind of talked all morning about, we have this problem in the industry of trying to respond to regulatory compliance, other needs, even within our own companies, of this point-to-point analysis. We have a bunch of different stores of data. They are all structured differently. If you're a carrier A, you're doing it differently than carrier B. Then there's a merger that happens, and now we've got two different silos of information, even within a single building. So what we identified was, there has to be a standard around this. People back away from standards a lot of times because a lot of us have worked in them, trying to develop them, working with other groups, and they just move really slow. They don't really address the needs that we had initially set out to address. So we took a little bit of a different approach with openIDL. We did license the IIW, and just to kind of set some context on what that is, it has been maintained by IBM for a number of years, 30 plus years, with support and involvement from many of the largest carriers and some smaller carriers, niche players in this, to try to round out what that does. IIW is a subset of the IIA, the Insurance Information Architecture. And so IIW, the Insurance Information Warehouse, is the analytics set of that. And so you can think about how this has been implemented in the past. Accord comes out a lot. That's the other side of the IIA. And so this is where Accord was donated one version of the model, which Again, more context, the model is just blueprints. So Cord was donated this blueprint for the messaging model some time ago. They developed one cut of it and have been trying to manage that on their own going forward for, since that happened. So they have their AL3, the XML models. They work well because people have implemented them in many different systems to do system messaging. So claim system needs to know some coverage information from policy system, and so that's what you're going to transact that data across. But when you need to know information about, your insurance or things that we're talking about on the analytics side, those models don't really work for that. And so that's why the IIW exists. A lot of carriers are using this under the hood of many of their data warehousing implementations. Again, they're blueprints, so you kind of take and use them for your use case.
So I might want, an upgrade of granite cabinets or countertops, whereas the model really only calls for the Formica countertops, right?
Sure.
So kind of same thing, right? You customized, you built out your house, but you had a blueprint that you were working from.
And what you knew you needed was a countertop.
Right.
And so the IIW and how we've implemented this was to build an enterprise architecture that says, I need a countertop. And now for regulatory reporting, we know we need a granite countertop. And so we've been able to take the model, develop a part of the standard, which is the enterprise architecture layer of it, that allows us to build things like the regulatory reporting model. It might do other use cases that you brought up here, Truman and Joan talked about those. But there's a couple stages that might make a little bit more sense as we step through this a little bit further.
All right.
And so along with being the enterprise architecture kind of foundation of it, it's also important that it's industry-based. And so the donation of the time and energy and investment from all the carriers over time has given us something that speaks to 100% of the the business of doing insurance, sorry. And so we're able to take that and leverage it, and not have to recreate all the different enumeration code sets, domains of information, all of that. We have all those building blocks that we get with industry standard models.
So funny point of fact, we were joking about it earlier, but Joan's been chasing this model for what, 30 years. She's wanted to work on this model and get this model for 30 years. And we finally got there with IBM on this project. And it's important because as we were talking about, there are a lot of companies who've licensed this already, and they've built things that are close, right? They're close to what we want to get to. And it was important to us to use a model that already had, a great deal of history behind it, so we're not reinventing the wheel, and the conversion for those companies that are already using it will be much easier, right? Always, AIS, choose the easier path where you can, right? Look for what all people can leverage, and this was our, attempt to do so. So.
Yeah, and so instead of doing what we have on the left, every time you need to use the information, use the data to create information and doing something specific for that, we'll get your data into a single model that lays in the middle of this, and then we'll be able to, answer to all those different use cases down the road. Now, I also kind of alluded to, there's many different components to the model, to our standard, we'll call it. And so that logical layer that lives in the middle could be used to produce other things. So right now we talk about the harmonized data store. We've produced one version of a model, of a schema that gets built into that harmonized data store as a JSON schema. That works well for the openIDL initial use case of regulatory reporting, but there's a lot of opportunities to very rapidly develop other physical models and a different type of database that can be used for other things as well. So
Okay. Advances?
That's
to
modeling.
scare you. That scared me.
This one? Okay, that's not bad. So the modeling process kind of looks like this. Now, we're taking on all that modeling effort for homeowners right now. And we've done the homeowners, we've done what we colloquially call Homeowners Plus. We'll talk about tiers in a minute too. But now we're working in auto. And what we do with this is we start with a bunch of analysis. We look at what sources we have. Today we're looking initially at the AS stat plans because that's something we know very well and does support a lot of the data calls of regulatory reporting. And so we take that and we say, okay, what bits and pieces of the openIDL packages do we need to employ into the openIDL data standard in order to fit all of these data sources into a target somewhere in that model? And so that goes from domain modeling, so in really specific data modeling terms. Domain modeling is just saying, oh, I know I have claims, I know I have buildings, I know I have insurance, getting those high-level concepts together, start to get some requirements from the business of what they are, right? We go into the BIM, as we like to call it, the business information model. That's where we start looking into the industry standards themselves and say, where are some, things, or where are places where we can harvest those, that historical work to land that data in. So we don't want to create new areas or new domains of information. We want to seek out from the business where in the IAW models those land. That allows us to start doing the real data modeling work, and this is where we produce something that can be reused for the different use cases. So producing different physical models will come out of this kind of third stage of the process, where, really all that you might care about in the first two images is the fact that somebody did this. It is contributed back to the openIDL, but this is where you might actually start leveraging and producing your own value internally, saying, I can see how that could be used to produce this data mart for this functional area of my company, something like that. And then lastly, we produce the JSON schemas that are implemented in the harmonized data store. Through this process, as kind of the parallel development effort that's going on, we've also mapped out how all that source data will land in that JSON document, how it gets translated into a common language for the business. Okay. Any questions there?
Okay.
So how's the IAW perform this?
So actually, the middle two slides are where we're doing work in the IAW.
Okay.
Yep. So all of these folders, as they might be kind of small on the screen, are different packages within the IAW itself.
Yeah.
And so just doing homeowners and just the small, slice of data, that's the stat plan data, we're able to basically use 80%, I think it was, of the packages in IAW. Very small parts of it, in many cases, but a lot of the different domains and relationships that are already there.
Okay. Ooh.
A lot of words on this slide. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we currently have right now is the homeowners and the homeowners plus data tier. I think it's a good time to talk about the different tiers.
Okay.
So within openIDL, we understand that there might be different appetites for participation. And so what we created is a 3-tier system of participation where you could dip your toes in, as you would say, and just do stat reporting with us. That'd be tier 1. And so that's that homeowner statistical plan that we've currently mapped out in the openIDL data standard. We want to go a little bit further with that and do tier 2. That's anything additional to that. We're looking at something that's additive to the tiers as we go up. Would be the additional data required to do some program support. And so if you want to use this internally as a store for your actuaries, perhaps, to use that information and build additional products, that might be the way that you play there. It would also be the way that AIS might start interacting with you and requesting data and consents for pulling the data for any development work we're doing, for the industry. Now, the third tier would be, hey, I don't want to do any of my own data calls anymore. That we said before that the data calls that AIS does and ISO does for you is only a small subset of what Jim's doing out of his 1,000 data calls that he's doing off to the side with his team managing that. So if you want to participate in tier 3, that goes away for you. And so what we're doing is mapping out all of the data calls that we understand happen in the world. There's a big harvesting effort that goes on there. Lori's part of that in the back of the room too. And we said, what data is required to be able to do that? What level of, or what interval of data coming in? Is it daily? Is it monthly? Is it weekly? Whatever that is. And then what grain does it have to be at to? And so that's the tier 3. And these all build upon each other. And so that's what we have today, is with homeowners in those 3 tiers.
Okay.
The subject areas there, if you want to go look under the hood in IAW and see what packages are employed, they're listed again. And then I think that top right diagram is a super useful ER diagram.
I just needed busy stuff for the slide, that's all.
Okay. A little bit more about how the packages are being employed. So each one of these folders, again, speaks to a package directly from IAW. And we've called out the ones that were just part of the homeowner stat plan, so you can see that we've used most of them. And then where they actually, the individual data elements, policy form is going to be a standard text of communication. Things like that just helps, people, and you can have these slides right afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Understand
I'll
how we're
publish
leveraging that and where your data might fall into these different buckets.
Right. So just think of it this way, because this becomes important for the exercise that we're going to do around design thinking. Those tiers are designed for, first tiers should be easier, right? Because you're doing reporting of some magnitude in stat, whether it's with us or ISO or IS or NIS or whoever, you're doing some level of that already. So it's taking what you probably already do and some mapping, right? Because all our stat plans might look a little different, but getting that initial set in, okay? Tier 2 is a little more complicated, right? A little on the not as easy scale, right? But gives you some more functionality depending upon the types of initiatives or things you might have going on internally within your organization. And obviously, tier 3 will be, okay, I am all in, right? I am doing all of this. I don't expect anybody to do that in the pilot, but that is there. So if we go through these exercises and we have a pilot that you find value in, right? There's some options to keep stepping up in the way you take that data in. So the objective is not to tell you, go do this tomorrow, right? The objective is let's find the easiest way. Now remember that, and remember this, I'll bring this schema back up, because what I'm going to ask you to do to start thinking about in design thinking, the actual activities you have internal to your organization, and you don't have to get super specific, but if you have a project around, I'm trying to automate something in my underwriting, or I'm trying to automate something in my claims handling, or I'm trying to automate, I'm moving to a new policy administration system, or some of those things, those activities you're doing, we're going to ask you to start thinking about those and create your company persona so that when we start targeting, what could we do in a pilot that it gives you value beyond just, okay, I accomplished my statistical reporting this month or this year.
Which is important.
Which is important, and you must do. But what gives value in that to you, right? Is there some piece of this reporting component that you could actually take back into some of the initiatives or things that you are trying to do individually as your organization, right? And leverage this. So it's not a situation of I'm asking you to stop doing the things you're doing today and pivot and go do something new. I'm asking you to redistribute in the scheme of what can I use this to give value to this thing I'm trying to accomplish also inside my organization, right? So you're looking at it from that perspective, which also will feed into data strategy, which we're going to follow up with and come back to in just a minute. But it's asking you to make that next level and to start making some decisions about, I could see how this could support X in my organization and also be pivotal to an external data strategy, okay? So those are the type things we'll start to work on in design thinking.
And maybe I didn't say it explicitly, but one of the biggest values that we see out of this as part of the regulatory reporting use case is that, there is some effort to get your data mapped into this standard, but once it is in the JSON format, once you have a harmonized data store accepting data in, those extraction patterns actually work for you. Whereas if we, even just take like a stat plan, take a batch of data in a file, I can't write an extraction pattern against that because it's going to come in, at that format, but it's not a database, and then it's going to land in some specific database that might be relational, might be, just a document store. I don't really know what it is, but we don't have that consistency even with the stat plans themselves. And so where we've taken a difference on approach on this is throw stat plans out. We're going to publish the standard. It has all the information on that middle tier of how to get there, but you don't necessarily need to know how to build the JSON stores. That's built as part of the harmonized data store and deployed out there with all the functionality that comes along with it. So that's really where we're getting the first benefit.
And you never have to do it again. And you can start using it for more than just your reporting. So if you give data to other third-party sources, this is a pathway.
And all of the, and it's, you might have to change it a little bit, but what we're efforting to do is create a standard that's additive. And so as new use cases come up and new questions are being asked, new types of data calls that can't be asked with the current standard as it is.
Pet insurance.
we just tack that pet on at the end, right?
Right.
But that's the goal. It's not a big refactor. We're not gonna, force upon you, okay, here's a different type of database you're gonna have to throw behind this and all the additional work. Let's just work with the models we have and add on those functionalities, so they don't break anything current.
Right.
A little bit more of a modern SDLC with that as well.
So you're suggesting that they leverage this as their own internal data strategy that lends itself well to easily moving to an external strategy?
Exactly.
Correct.
Like I said at the beginning, the hardest questions we have, or the most common questions we have in terms of how hard is this to be, to use, is how well you know your data and how quickly can you get your data into this format. If you understand your data relative to the IIW model, you plug right in. There's no work at all. There's very little amount of work because the reference points.
Joe has to do that work, he says there is work.
Well, there's work in the organizations, but the data mapping exercise, that becomes very easy if you already understand your data relative to another standard that we both reference, right? Because if you're here and we're here, and we both know our position relative to that third point, it's very simple. That mapping is then done. We can get to there through that.
And those packages right there in the IIW model have that level of detail and definition in those packages?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's a massive model, and so you get a lot of things that cover everything from the business of insurance through other financial services, banking, and all this as well. So what we are doing is harvesting only the important pieces out of the IIW that are required to fit the use cases that we have today, and then allowing the opportunity to extend them to other financial use cases, whatever they may be, in the future. So we pare it down to just what's required, so you don't have to boil the ocean with it. You want to just go into tier 1 and do stat reporting, that's there for you.
Well, and I assume every carrier is already mapping their data to the stat plan anyway, right? Because they have to file. So you're just saying
Yes.
those are all disparate
As-
models?
Yes,
As we're developing this, I require of the team that we have to validate the models as we go through, and the only way we can do that is put real data through it, and what real data do we have is the stat data. And so that's what, every time we develop on a new line of business, we're also gonna deliver the ETL that would get you immediately from a stat reporter into an openIDL participant at tier 1.
yeah.
The present processing systems we have, we enter our information one time and then it separates it into whichever report we want. We would have to, and I doubt it's going to migrate over to this, we would have to physically migrate it over to your information, over to your format somehow.
Yeah, that has to happen, but it can happen in a couple different ways, right? It could happen.
As a smaller company, I hate to interrupt you, but a smaller company, that would be a major concern, how it would be migrated over to your.
Right, so you want to
Yeah,
try?
I want to make sure I clarify the question. So today you have a data warehouse of stuff that you've developed internally. You will continue to have that data warehouse. The only thing that we're looking at here is that for regulatory reporting, data would be extracted from the system or systems that you have today and put into the harmonized data store. Our system would not replace anything that you have internally.
The extraction part, how is it extracted?
So that's what we walked through before. So you take the data that you're doing today, so the statistical reporting data streams that you have going out of your warehouse today, right? So you're doing stat reporting today, right?
Not really.
Not really?
requires that.
Yeah.
Okay. So then this would be a new effort. So if you were doing it today through AIS, then it would be very little new work you need to do in order to do the tier 1 level of functionality to do statistical reporting. If that data is not coming out today, it's a new data stream, and there would need to be work to do that. If, for example, Commissioner does the new data call that says we need to have the home daycare number of policies that are out there. So just one data call, everybody tells us how many home daycare policies you had, in the last year. That would be a new data stream that you'd have to create, but it would be just a couple of data points, right? It would be very minimal, a spoonful effort, not a let's move the
And
whole warehouse effort.
I heard you say you run a program and it spits out a report that was
Yeah,
predefined by.
We call for different reports on
Right,
different things.
exactly. Yeah, so it's similar to a data call, you're exporting
Yeah.
some view of that information that fits somebody's requirement.
Yeah, that we require ourselves. People are curiosity, so we
Sure.
know what to do with that.
For your own,
information.
business analytics.
And I assume, Joe, the better they understand their own data, which it sounds like possibly they do, if they're
Right.
one source spitting out multiple types of reports, the easier it is to map to the model.
It should be, and, you know, we're not quite at a universal translator for the data.
Well, that's,
Would like this, yeah.
that would be good.
That would be awesome.
We're working toward
We're
that.
making incremental progress towards it, and we will, you know, there'll be some time where that makes sense, you know, but there is some ETL effort that has to happen, some mapping and transformation effort that happens, so we wouldn't be necessarily asking you to write another program to spit out another report. We do have, as built out in the architecture that Truman was showing in that diagram, it didn't go into detail about the actual tooling in there, but that tooling accepts other configurations for different input formats. So we don't expect anybody to change, it might make sense for you to change your inputs, but we don't expect you to have to change your inputs, but we will have to map that data into the openIDL data standard.
Well, generally speaking, we don't write our own programs, we buy it from a vendor, the vendor, you know, the processing system
Sure.
that works, and that's where we get our programs from.
So Joe, how many data elements are in the homeowners plus data standard today?
It's over 100.
Okay, so 100 data elements, and what type of data is in there? So there's policy, the risk, so it's
Right.
a house, it's.
Yeah, it's these things.
It's wood
Yeah.
frame, it's.
That's right.
So it's data that carriers have today,
Mhm.
it's in your system, we're pretty confident you have that data. It's data that you're using to run your business, you collect that when you underwrite a risk, is it a house, how big is it? What
When
kind
was
of
it
roof
built?
does it have?
Yeah,
When
what kind of
was it
roof?
built?
It's
How
not
much
fun, it's not weird
cleaner?
data. This is something, that- and you bring up you buy the software from a vendor, and, you know, we're working with those vendors too. We want the Bright Cores, the Duck Creeks to be able to build this kind of input to our system into their functionality, because that, you get a lot of economies of scale there, right? So not every small carrier is using this one system, has to do it themselves. It's already, you know, comes part of it, it's a competitive advantage for those software vendors too. They can deliver that for you.
And whatever software package you're using, somewhere there's a map. Has to
Well,
be,
sure there
right?
is. Yeah.
Then you just kind of, then it's a function of let's sit down and these will make sense. I want to quickly pivot. Jim, we've gone through this with your company, right? We've mapped to the
We
stat
did.
plan, right? Right? How many lines of business and how quickly did that happen?
We only did homeowners for the pilot.
Right.
But we did 17 in the last.
But to
9
map
months.
to
You're
the,
talking for the stat.
yeah, for the stat plan, right? So,
Oh.
I mean, that would be a first step for some of these people, just map into what our stat plan is, right? So-
So that's less than, I mean, technology included, if it's less than a year.
That was the Hartford for
Millions of records.
millions of records.
So 17 different lines of business across 52 jurisdictions. In 1 year, you are now moved to statistical reporting.
Right.
You can see.
Which now that they're there, which could be a first step for some of you guys, just to see how it would, you don't have to use us if you don't want to, but just to
It's included
see.
with membership.
But it is included with membership. But once you do that functionality, what Joe's done is made sure that once it's in an AIS stat plan, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah, that's, we talk about this a lot internally, like, we want to get away from the stat plans, there's a lot of value to get away from the stat plans, but there's a lot of circumstances where it makes sense to go there as a first step too, because you are already doing stat reporting. Does allow you to play in tier one at a relatively lower cost. So at some level, we're always going to want to support that and need to support that, but the industry is going to move forward, and, you know, you got to probably at some point pick up and move with it, right?
Right.
And that's what we're actually talking about changing, right? As Joe said, we're getting away from the statistical plans and into a more dynamic data stream that is externally facing to the industries, you know, for the broader river that we're all gonna play in and around. And that's the part that needs to be managed, and it's gonna change, you know, and what we get out of it is not gonna be data sets to the regulators, it's gonna be answers to questions. It's gonna evolve, and that's what we're trying to get to, is a much more flexible pattern that can do more things instead of just the one, you know, regulatory reporting question that hasn't changed in a
Right.
couple decades.
Our pool of COBOL programmers is not getting larger too, so
Yeah.
there is a.
Not a lot of effort anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and I want to also circle back to, how do we do that with Hartford in a year? We did it agile. We did stand-ups, we did planning meetings, we worked in 2-week increments, what we call sprints, sorry. It left me there for a minute, and I lived it. Yeah, yeah. So Stephen and here, and you're worried about, okay, they're gonna send me off with this crap, and I'm gonna have to figure this out myself. No, we're gonna do this agile, and we're gonna plug in, and Stephen is here because he is a Scrum Master, and he will run those projects in the agile system. And so we're never gonna ask you for a deliverable, and the one thing you should understand about those sprints, when my team participates as legal with the product development teams as an agile group, we have discussions about what my team thinks they can deliver in that 2 weeks. And it's not about the amount of what they deliver, it's the value of what they deliver, right? And how that fits into the overall plan. And we do big room planning, and basically our quarter is kind of mapped out for us. But never beyond that, here's 2 weeks of value we're providing, and I'm going to come back into this team and I'm going to deliver that. And if I don't, this is where managing gets a lot easier as a manager of this project, because guess what? Now you're not just answerable to me as the manager being over that. You're answering to your coworker, because you guys had an agreement about what you were going to accomplish and the value you were going to bring in that 2 weeks. And you're not just disappointing me, you just disappointed the team for whatever reason. That's a big motivator. And it just brings a lot of clarity into what why I'm doing something, right? Because a lot of times we go back in our organizations, we don't know why we're doing what we're doing. Denise and I had a conversation about setting up the NAIC meetings, and a lot of times it's very hard to get, if you've done something the same way for so many years and so many times, it's really hard to step back and look and say, I'm going to do this in a different way. Agile lets you take that step back, start to look at, the value that you're delivering in that cycle. So, no, we're not going to leave you to go figure this out on your own. We're going to figure out what makes sense, right? A minimal viable product. Then we're going to say, okay, let's work this the way we work from AIS. Let's expose you to something that I won't tell you it's not a little uncomfortable. It's different, okay? It's just a different way of working. But if my lawyers can figure this out, and we're the last people to want to change, right? If they can figure it out, I'm pretty confident that everybody can work this way. But it's just movement, right? And it's different movement than what you're kind of used to doing. But we're not going to abandon you and say, here's your schema, go figure it out. We're gonna be committed to making you successful in the project, in the pilot. Okay. So any more questions of Joe? Do you guys kind of get the idea around the model and how we approach moving data? Everybody's going to be a little bit different, but we do have an idea about the easiest way.
There's a whole lot more geeky stuff and very long documents. Find me in the corner if you want, but.
Yeah. I had to just hold him back from putting 25 slides in here. So no, we can't do that. So, okay,
Thanks,
great.
Joan.
Thanks, Joe. All right, so I'm going to bring Joan back up because there's something we need to talk about now from the why our advisory, and this was kind of this populated, so you can kind of see some of those. We'll bring those back up when we do some of the design thinking. But now we need to talk about where we fit as an element, and this project fits as the next steps for a real data strategy. Mm-hmm. So I'll let you talk to them.
So let's go back to that data strategy. So every organization has some data strategy. You have the system that you bought that provides reporting. That data is very clean. You trust that data. The Hartford has a system that's very different, a data warehousing environment. Travelers has something very different. So that defensive internal data strategy will always exist within every organization. AIS has one. We have our data resource center. But we also are in this with you. We realize that what we deliver to the insurance industry, we need an offensive data strategy. And we need to help our members with that offensive data strategy. It's not going away. As the commissioner mentioned earlier, It's coming. In the next 5, 8, 10 years, it's going to come, and things will look differently 5 years from now, 8 years from now, 10 years from now. So what does it change? How does this change for AAIS? Well, in the past, we've created retrospective rating factors, and we deliver those to our members. And that's based on data that's 1 to 5 years old. That's kind of interesting, but as an advisory organization, what we've come to understand is we need to understand how our products are performing in the market. How are those rating algorithms working for you? How are the loss costs working for you? We can't wait and deliver loss costs to you anymore based on very old data. You're going to be expecting something else from us, and especially around new products such as flood, cyber liability, the sharing economy. You want to know how these products are performing in the market. If you're going to dip your toe into that market, you want to know what's happening to the other carriers that are doing the same thing. And we can't give you a report on that 2 or 3 years after you've entered that market. So we're feeling this as well. We need that external data strategy to serve our members. So that idea of centralized statistical data, we had to move away from that. We don't think we can do this, serve the market differently, unless we go to this more decentralized data model. And I'll give you an example in a minute of something very practical that we're working on right now. So we're going to move away from regulatory reporting to helping the industry do this through data standards and governance, right? And Truman mentioned that. We plan on giving up stat reporting. We've done that for 80 years. How can we let that go? We used to have a revenue stream from that. We gave it up. We don't charge for stat reporting at all anymore. That's not where we deliver value to our members. That should be automated. We should be doing something very different going forward. So we are going to do that. We should be doing some sort of analytics on behalf of our members, market research, bringing external data resources, that offensive data strategy. We need to bring that to our members and to the industry. That should be our job. How are we going to do that? And this is why this slide is here. Now is we're going to use smart contracts and extraction patterns. And now you're all experts in that, what that means, right? But we're not going to do data call reports. We're not going to do stat reporting going forward. What we'd really rather do is provide operational efficiency to the entire industry. We're going to build one extraction pattern that anybody can use. We're going to build one smart contract that anyone can use. Instead of what you're experiencing today, which is everybody, every time a data call comes out, you go figure it out on your own, and you do your best to do it, and you incur a lot of cost. Let's stop doing that. We don't have to do that anymore, but it requires us to do something very different. So let me talk about offensive data strategy and how that affected AAIS. So we have a really great actuarial department, and for at least 30 years, if you use any kind of a fire protection code in rating in your underwriting, you're using probably either that factor that comes from ISO or from AAIS. And both of them are based on some sort of physical inventory. Where is the fire station? How many trucks does it have? How many helmets? How many axes? It's the distance to the nearest fire hydrant. So AAIS is distance to water source, right? It's a physical measurement. We've used that forever. Does that matter? Now, our data team said, well, we're not sure. We actually don't think so. What really matters is how fast the fire department gets to the fire and how long it takes them to put it out. Do we have that data in our regulatory reporting data today? Answer is no. None of us have it. Where does it come from? Every fire station in the country collects that data, and they send it into the National Fire Protection Agency. And they have this huge data repository. And that's what our actuarial team said, if we're going to change the way we think about this, we need to look at their data, not the data that we've been collecting for the past 30 years, because that's not telling us anything. Nothing new, and actually maybe nothing
Nothing useful.
valid, right? And it doesn't incorporate anything like fire mitigation practices within a community. Maybe if you do have an education and fire suppression credit within your community or program, maybe you do better than anybody else in the country. So we had to look at our offensive data strategy. We are not going to provide the best products to our members unless we look outside of our four walls and begin to incorporate this data in. So we want, as we do that, we want to make this data available to all of our members. And the other example is flood. Yes, we all want to understand what a private flood market would look like. How many of us have regional flood data inside of our four walls? And how we performed across the industry in these major catastrophes? I would argue none of us. There's one source of that data, FEMA. They've been collecting that. They've held that data close to the vest forever. But we believe that, we've already talked to them about using this data going forward. We do have access to that data now. AEIS does have access to that data. But fundamental to this strategy, the openIDL strategy, is we're not holding it close to the vest inside our four walls. We're going to put it on an openIDL node. And everyone who's a member of the network will have access to that data, because you know what? You've got really smart actuaries inside your organizations, and they might start doing something with that data that AAIS would have never have thought to do. And there may be a really good idea or solution that comes out from that. And that's why RMS and CAT Risk being the leading flood modeling company today, jumped right on it. They said, we want to chair that working group. We get it. If we have that repository of data surrounding flood and how we might offer flood policies in the market, we're modeling companies. We're supposed to inform the industry. We want to be part of that. And they said, we can't do this alone. They have an external offensive data strategy. RMS is publishing their standard now as an open standard. And they realize that as a company, they will not be successful going forward unless they have an offensive data strategy. So that's, really to wrap up everything that we've kind of been talking about today and to set the stage for design thinking today. We can't solve the problems in our industry doing the same thing we've done in the past. We have, yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to ask a question about the fire data and also the FEMA data. Are you, maybe only as an interim step, but is AIS going to physically store that data locally?
Not inside our four walls.
Or do you expect them to have a node or?
Yes, we have asked RMS and CAT Risk, they are members of the openIDL now, and we've asked them to define the data standard, and they're going to work with other carriers in the industry. Let's look at FEMA.
Who's going to do it too?
What's that?
Well, we hadn't talked them into it yet, but the data that they have released, we could actually
Yeah,
put
we
in
do
a
have the
node.
data they have released and what that data standard looks like.
Okay, but physically, the data will reside in the FEMA databases and they'll have a node and you'll.
We've talked to them about it.
If
They're
I'm
sli-
really good at what I do, yes, Denise, they will eventually. I will wear them down.
As an interim step, you're going to get access to the data, make it available to your
Yes,
members.
Right.
we will do that, absolutely. Every step of the way, just as we've done from the beginning. If we need to stand up a node on the openIDL and make that available to our members, we will do that. And whatever CAT Risk and RMS can add to that, that will be available on the network. What we're asking them to do is to define that data standard, just going back to what Joe talked about. You have to start with a common place to put the data. So we know what the FEMA data looks like. What is their once we have that openIDL node with a data standard that matches theirs, what's the barrier to putting that data over there? Right? How can you say no to making that data available to all the actuaries in the industry to come up with a flood product? Right now, the barrier is, that's really hard,
Well, PII is one of their
Yeah.
biggest barriers, right? That's for years, they wouldn't even release anything because they were so, and they told us this in their meeting.
Yeah.
It's so hard for them because PII has taken on its own life, personal identifiable information, right? It's taken its own lifespan, and they are scared to death about what they can actually say about this risk.
So we can solve that. Put it in the harmonized data store and let people ask questions.
One of the reasons why people sent a lot of that data out to the world in the first place was took them a
Yep.
long time and a lot of energy to go back into their systems and send it back out, so we provide for them ways to more easily answer individual questions rather than just let it all in.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
that's the power that they might see in this network and use the ecosystem.
You know,
So what we're talking about now is more of a flood offering versus where you're talking about this need to identify and needs. That's separate, these are two separate.
Separate
Yeah,
working groups.
separate
So when we
working
talked
groups.
about the working groups, and this is the power of this model. If we had built the internet with the traditional project management, the way we do standards bodies, all of that, if we had really done it that way, we wouldn't have anything we have today. When you're talking about a networked solution, and in this case, an offensive data strategy, you have to bring together a community. You have to provide a common platform to build on. So in the case of the internet, it was TCP/IP is what runs the network, right? It's this protocol that runs the network. That's all that existed in the beginning. And somebody said, I'm going to put electronic mail on top of that, and this is how it's going to work. And somebody working completely separately said, oh, I'm going to build this World Wide Web thing over here. Right? And somebody else said, oh, well, I want to build a way for us to, share supercomputing centers, and I'm going to go do my work. And so they built solutions that mattered. They wrote the standards about how they were going to work, and they were all going on in parallel. Hundreds of projects were going on in parallel, all to this common platform. This is the part that held it all together, but all sorts of creative projects could run on top of that. So we've set up the openIDL in the very same framework. We have the openIDL platform. We know how to build a network of nodes that carriers control. AAIS, because of our charter, will take on the responsibility of solving the problems of regulatory reporting, right? Because that's what the model law asks us to do, and we will do that. But I'd really like to know what Jim's got on his 100 use cases over there, because what I expect is probably the Hartford's got some pretty interesting ideas, and they're going to start developing some solutions. They understand the power of the openIDL. They're going to go build something. And my guess is State Farm's going to work with Nationwide, Travelers, and Hartford, and they may solve a problem around subrogation or something. I don't know. But you know what? That's not in our charge. AAIS is not responsible for that type of a solution. So we're going to do regulatory reporting. And North Dakota, the state of North Dakota, may sponsor some really cool application that works on top of the openIDL around flood. And the Hartford's going to have some folks that are going to chair a working group, and they're going to solve a problem that they have a real interest in. And what happens then, and I want, the NEIC, I was asking about the blanks. That data goes to you guys now, I guess. I mean, we see the NEIC, the sky's the limit on all sorts of things that can be done on top of this platform. They're looking at a lot of new products and services over the next 5, 8, 10 years. They may be able to work with this community and come up with some things we never would have thought of, and it's not within our wheelhouse. So that's design thinking, is bringing people together to develop empathy. What are the problems we're trying to solve? Identifying what our highest priorities are for this group that exists today. And we'll come up with something, we want to do this, and we'll do this for the North Dakota project. But then Denise could say, I had an idea. This isn't really the group that'll have a passion for it, but I'm going to go and grab this other community of folks, and we're going to develop a solution in parallel, and we'll make that available to the insurance community. And then eventually, Jim's going to come up with this really great application, and it might be a commercial application. But it runs on top of the openIDL as well. So that's how you start to think outside of what we've done for the past 80 years. This platform is here. So today, we're going to work on an offensive data strategy. So for all of you is to think about, what is your offensive data strategy? How are you going to use data outside of your four walls to stay relevant in your market, to grow inside your market? how can this platform help you do that? So we'll talk about that today. But then what I hope is that you're dreaming at night about the openIDL and all the things that you could possibly do on top of that, and that you're going to come back at the next design thinking session and say, I'd like to start a working group because I really want to drive this different solution going forward. And then AAIS is here to help. We have the model that we can help with this. You don't have to license a model. You don't have to do all the data standards yourself. We have people that will work with us to get data into the openIDL and to help build extraction patterns and to help build smart contracts. And we'll do this iteratively, back to Agile. We don't do these really long project plans that are going to take 3 years to roll something out. What can we get done in the next 90 days? Take a look at it. Is it doing what you hoped it would do for you? Maybe not. Maybe you'll need to pivot. That's how we were able to create the openIDL with the first version within 6 months and the second version about 9 months later, and we're at the done. We have the system developed. We want to use this process to work with all of you to show you that your investment in time is not huge, and you get to see things very quickly to see if you still want to stay involved. And then hopefully you really love it, and you do stay involved, and we build an application. It might be this cause of loss report that Truman tried to spur an idea. You may have much better ideas of what you need to see here. And we'll work with you over time to build it. So you're not left on your own. We're not asking you to map, to program. We're just asking you to participate in design thinking and give us your good ideas.
Yeah. Any questions on data strategy? Everybody starting to see the flow here? Yes, maybe? All right. The question will always come up, what's this going to cost me? So,
Okay, yep.
What's this going to cost us, Joan?
Well, it depends on the level of participation, so I can give you some examples, all right? So a very simple entry point is, for example, to bring up a node, not in a production setting, but one that's kind of a test node, and to load data into that node. And that can cost anywhere from, in a hosting environment with everything loaded, a couple of $1,000s a month, to the configuration that Truman showed you that we're using for all of our work is about $5,000 a month. Now, the Hartford, if they're going to go into full production, they're doing the work on that, it'll be more than $5,000 a month to host their servers, because they would have multiple development and test and production, and they might have a completely different environment. And they may need assistance with data mapping, for example. They may have some ideas where they might want to work with a consulting firm. And so the case of a large carrier that's all in that regard, it could go on to, a couple $100,000 to get started on the project, to get everything set up with all the data loaded. And I mean, we went in loading Hartford data with millions and millions of records. We understand it's a very complex process. So it's a very relatively low cost of entry with a test node. But if a company is really struggling with the investment at all, we do have the multi-tenant node. And this is where Joe can help you load statistical data, for example, into our multi-tenant node. And now your data is on the network and can be used to participate in these reports. But we can't stress enough that it's not just about, am I going to save money today? Can I use your multi-tenant node to transition stat reporting? Yes, you can, and we're here to help doing that, to help you do that. But what we're really here to help you do is to get to that offensive data strategy. And in order for you to do that, you really actually have to leave AAIS at some point and have your own node. So very low cost of entry to participate in this test. You can provide data into the multi-tenant node. If you'd like to take it to the next step and bring up a small server, and Truman did the industry test drive, it took 4 hours. You could spend a couple $1,000s during the time of this trial and let your own teams poke at it, dig at, look at what it really means to run a server like this. But if you're all in, we can help you get hooked up with some folks to stand up a full production environment as well and start to make that a cornerstone of your offensive data strategy.
real quick note, one of the key things to understand in terms of the ongoing cost, it's structured very much like, based on performance, right? You're paying for the value, so it's like your cloud services, your compute cycles, the amount of bandwidth that's moving over the wire, the amount of storage in the system, it's gonna be relative to your use of the system. So if you're getting a lot of value out of it, the price will be a little bit higher, but it'll be commensurate, for the use, for the use of the system. You're paying by RPM, if you will. So if you're a small organization, like a few policies out there, your bill's gonna be very small. If you're a very large organization, your bill's gonna be large, but it'll be roughly the same percentage, for the work that it's doing. The more work you make.
The other thing I'd just like, as you consider, is this something that you want to do and what your offensive data strategy is, I want to go back to the network analogy. Right? So everybody's relying on the web today to communicate in your organization. You're buying Cisco routers, you're buying wireless devices, you've got web servers running. You have all sorts of applications that are running today to provide these services. Right? And so I would look at what it takes for you to work in a networked environment today. It's things that we kind of forgot, we kind of forget that they're there and they're running. The cost of an openIDL at this point is very small compared to, for example, a lot of other things that you're running just in the normal course of business. It may sound, wow, it might be a couple $1,000s a month. I would ask you to go look and see what you're paying for probably multiple web servers that have come into your organization over time in order for you to run your business. And this is the same thing that is true with an offensive data strategy. You're going to make some investment. You can make the investment that's on the left of Joe's slide, which is lots and lots of proprietary data collections going crisscrossed everywhere. Or you can invest in a data strategy that streamlines that and makes it more efficient. And that's really what we're trying to offer here.
One of the things that I want to make sure we understand, that first line in particular, when we say retrospective rating factors versus product performance monitoring, when we look in the rearview mirror, we can only see where we've been. We can't see what we're missing. But, all those things that are happening around our homes that the insurance industry isn't handling, we're not getting any information on that at all. We may be doing more premium, more coverage in homeowners insurance, but if we're missing all the room nights that are in the sharing economy, is that product effective? How is that product performing? We have a good loss ratio, but
How does that product need to change?
Exactly.
Right.
Got to
So
have some
again,
insight into that.
in terms of cost and how you participate with us, because we're really hoping that everybody here participates, it can be zero, right? We can bring your data into our multi-tenant node and we'd be happy to do that. Or if we need to, we can bring additional nodes up just for the North Dakota project to help people understand the technology a little bit more. AAIS is willing to make that investment. But what I'm really hoping you all walk away from here is that it's not just a dollar and cents evaluation right here. It's really a long-term strategy and how you will play in this that's going to roll out in 5, 8, or 10 years. It's going to happen. So we'd love to hear from you as part of this. How should we make this happen in the most cost-effective way possible?
Okay.
Right.
All right. Truman, will you come pull up the slides that I just sent you?
I was wondering what that was.
Yeah, sorry. That's Robin.
Late-breaking
Wait till
change.
the absolute
All
last
right.
minute
Yep,
to give you my
exactly, right.
slides.
All right, yep, sure. Give me a second here.
We tried to get my machine to work on, it didn't like it today. So it likes the Macs. Last time we were here, it liked
Like
my
yours.
machine, not the Mac. Voila. Okay. Everybody ready to do some design thinking? Get up and stretch. Yeah? Ready? Okay. I know. It's a little scary. So we've talked a little bit about what design thinking is, and I know we've got some folks here who have done this activities before. And you'll be like, what is she making us do that for? That's really weird, okay? But there's a method to the madness, and I'm not going to ask you and jump in and say, okay, it's now time for you to tell me exactly what the minimum viable product is for our design, for our pilot in North Dakota, right? Not gonna do that. We're gonna work through some activities, we're gonna practice, and then we're gonna do the exercise that kind of gives us some insight around that. Okay, so what do I need to know about design thinking? Ground rules. We start on time, which I've already blown right through.
Go for one.
So, pay attention, right? I mean, I know everybody's got stuff going on at work, but kind of put that away when you're engaging with the team that you're on, and pay attention to what people are saying to you and how they're talking to you. Talk less, write more. We're going to get some stickies that are on your table. You will be introduced to the world of sticky notes and how that kind of generates ideas. And then write less, draw more, which I have not seen an insurance crowd draw anything, so I'm not going to put that stressor on you. Apparently, we are just not picture people. We like to write our thoughts out, but we do not
Long
like to
hand.
draw them.
That's why you have a Sharpie
We
and
do
not a
like
pencil.
to illustrate them, and I'm a poor illustrator, so I can relate. And then when you're working through some of these, don't just dwell upon something. Choose quantity over quality. If you just have a thought, put it down, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'll even tell you, you can just make aspirational things up for your organization. It doesn't have to be what your organization is doing. Nobody's going to hold you to, didn't you tell me you were doing a new underwriting thing? Think about the things that you're interested in that you've heard discussed in your organization and put those down and talk through those, because you're going to find some other people that probably have the same thoughts around that. Encourage to observe. Sometimes when we start thinking about things or we have thoughts about stuff, we automatically shut ourselves down by going, that's a real secret, right? Don't do that. Let it go. Just put it out there. Don't get caught up in the minutia of it, of thinking it through so much. Embrace the discomfort. People are going to put things up there that make you a little uncomfortable, okay? It's okay. And then one of my favorite things, which we'll do our first activity around, is called yes and. When someone puts an idea out in front of you, and Denise has actually corrected me on this a couple of times, that's good. Instead of telling someone, no, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, or I just don't understand how that works, take their idea and build on it with yes and. Not yes but, or yes, yes and build the idea toward something that's more workable, right? And you'd be really surprised how good that is. And why are we doing this? And we talked a little bit about empathy. And I like this Maya Angelou. I've used it a couple of times now. People will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people never forget how you make them feel, okay? And empathy is really about being able to say, wow, that validates what I'm thinking, or that's a different way of looking at a problem than I had, or wow, you have the same problem I have. You just have it from a different aspect. And so empathy really helps us to connect to the people in our teams, because not every company's in the same place. Obviously we have different parties, like the regulatory environment is here, and the regulators are here, and we have smaller companies, and we have larger companies, and mid-sized companies, and we have everything in between, right? But if you'll just take a moment and give that effort into the discussions that are going to go on in your groups, it will make a real difference.